This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
And welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast with you boys, Andrew and Josh.
Hi.
Josh had a conversation with me yesterday about doing a podcast episode today because he feels strongly that you guys need to learn about monitoring, and I agree. I think,
yeah. Well, I think it's everything, not that it's everything. It's something that everyone deals with, you know?
That's true.
Because, you see people using really nice speakers, and you see people using not so nice speakers, but, they're both doing great work, and you're like, what should I do?
So I was going to say, so I think today we're going to talk about monitoring as far as the physical speakers, your listening environment, and ways to kind of approach listening in the environment, different, monitor setups. I think we'll kind of talk through some price points. I assume that that'll kind of come up just naturally, but some price points and maybe, a few other not monitor listening options.
Yes, precisely. So I think that we should start out with why.
Okay, yeah, that's a
you
good
would
one.
need monitors or nicer monitors. So for those who are new, the difference between standard speakers and studio monitors is that studio monitors are going to give you a better response whenever you are working, meaning that you're going to hear more detail in the actual frequency response, but it's also going to translate better whenever you finish up a mix and you want to go play it in the car or on your AirPods or wherever. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the very basic idea of
another main difference is that studio monitors are, I'm not going to say perfectly so, but they are not frequency hyped. They are supposed to be frequency flat. Supposed to be frequency flat, and that's a key. That's a key term. Yeah, that's a key. That is a key point right there. But the idea is that your studio monitors should be frequency flat, roughly, so that whatever you do mixing wise will translate on any speaker system, whether it's a car, another set of studio speakers, AirPods, the radio, whatever.
Yeah. So if you're I forgot what I was gonna say. Just cut that pause out.
Nope.
Because I had a thought and then I had to burp and then I burped and by the time I burped the thought was gone.
So that's how we do it.
Yeah, it's a good Tuesday. So whenever you're kind of starting out, I think it's best to just get a set of decent speakers and learn how to use them. Benny Blanco still uses his old Rockets from whenever he was a teenager. Those are $150 a speaker.
So here, and that actually to me is a really good starting point of think about what you're doing first, right? So Benny Blanco is a songwriter and a producer, generally speaking. He's not mixing anything that he does. So what he wants out of studio monitors is something exciting and loud that he can make music and it keeps him excited, right?
Yeah. And Rockets are pretty hyped. And so
they're low end hyped, especially.
Yeah. So he's just known those speakers for so long and he's sending the songs out for mix. So it really isn't that big of a deal for him. And plus I'm really not entirely sure, but I mean, his songs might even go through a second set of hands where they're kind of finishing the song, and then that person is kind of cleaning up the mix before it goes to an actual mix engineer.
Yeah, like a pre-mix.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's not that big of a deal for him. Um, if you are getting into mixing, then you're obviously going to want to look at something a lot nicer. But also, if you're not getting
Mhm.
into mixing completely, it's still important to have good monitoring. Drew and I have talked about this a lot over the past few months because we feel like we're both in that place where our speakers are holding us back.
Mhm.
And we're just kind of wasting a lot of time with mixes not translating properly. Now, 50% of your sound is your speakers, the other 50% is going to be your room. In my case, I've mixed out of 3 different rooms in the past calendar year, or 4 technically. And
Yeah.
so it's hard for me to, justify treating a room really well if I know I'm not going to be there long. That's also why I haven't upgraded my speakers yet, is because it's hard to justify having a $3,000 set of speakers in an untreated room. So now that we're going to be moving into a more permanent place here shortly, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think that whenever you're making that decision, it's super important to research all the brands and figure out why they're better
Mhm.
than one another, but also listen to them. If you can't listen to them, thankfully, companies like Sweetwater have a really great return policy. So if you don't like something, you're able to easily exchange it, which is super important because, I mean, you could go, we've talked about making the trip to like Vintage King or to
Yeah.
the studio in NYC that has all of the PMCs there, because
Mhm.
we're both really into the brand PMC. They kind of set themselves apart in a lot of ways, both with their design, but also just straight up down to the kind of components that they use. Um, and I don't like, you've never listened to a set of PMCs, right?
I have at Vintage King whenever we were looking at buying my friend Chris Bowman's Barefoots, and we were looking for Amphion's, and I think we went through Focals as well, but the PMCs that they had weren't the PMCs that we were looking at. They were the top end sideways the dual setup.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
the big
that's
boys that are like
it's not
very,
I
very
can't
expensive.
reference off of that.
Right. So, yeah, the whole idea is that wherever you're at, you want to make sure that your gear isn't necessarily holding you back. Right now, we did an episode all about microphones. I decided I'm not getting a U87, but I haven't bought one yet because my slate mic isn't holding me back. I'm not
Mhm.
tracking people every day. I'm not, traveling like I was supposed to outside of the pandemic,
Mhm.
so there's no reason for me to upgrade because right now it's not holding me back. If I'm just cutting demo vocals of myself, this mic sounds great on my voice and I've learned how to use it really well.
Mhm.
And I can guarantee you, once I get a nicer microphone, I'm still going to be using this microphone for backing vocals because that's basically what this mic is meant for.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you want to make sure that your gear isn't holding you back. My friend Rob actually mentioned that whenever he was talking about his Amphions,
Mhm.
and that was something that kind of blew me away because I never really thought of gear that way. It's not that you want something nicer just because it sounds better, right? Because
Mhm.
if you're chasing that, you're never going to find it because at the end of the day, it's not the gear, it's how you use it.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to look at gear from the point of view of, is this holding me back? What's holding you back?
that
So,
that one's for you, Enoch.
yeah, if anyone's in make pop music, you get it. But but
But no.
so I think that that's super important to think about. Like, I'm my first love was guitar, and I love vintage guitars. I love Fender guitars. I even love Gibson guitars.
Mhm.
And I haven't been buying a lot of guitars because the one that's sitting right here isn't holding me back anymore. I basically designed the guitar, so I bought it cheap. That's a Chris Shiflett Mexican made Telecaster Deluxe, the 72 Deluxe. And so I put a hip shot bridge on it, I put locking tuners on it, finally got it set up exactly how I want it to be. Swapped out the pots, put in a set of Lindy Frolin
But so you changed the tuners out too, didn't you?
pickups. Yeah. And they're just perfect. Like every sound that I could possibly want outside of like metal, this guitar does it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't bought any other guitars because this one isn't holding me back, and any guitar after that is simply for the hobby side of being a guitarist. You know? And I think having that,
I was gonna say that's why I bought a guitar recently. I bought the that LTD from my friend Chris with the Evertune bridge in it, because at the time I was doing a decent amount of heavier guitar. As far by heavier, I mean like heavy music, metal and such, guitar tracking. And I bought it with the Evertune bridge and got it set up and everything so that whenever I do track heavier stuff, it goes out of tune, and it's so low it goes out of tune really easily. The Evertune keeps it a little more in tune every time and makes tracking a lot faster. That's something that my other guitar, my other 7-string, was holding me back from. It was taking 4 times as long to track because I was always having to retune and make sure, and maybe like it wasn't fully intonated because it's a really long scale length, so I was having to like tune for higher parts and then retune for lower parts, and like that was a strategic purchase that helped me level up. Now I can track metal songs 4 times faster than I could before, and it saves me time and makes me money because I can finish a song faster.
Right. Sorry, I was checking to make sure I'm connected through USB.
Yeah, you are. You're good.
Because Wi-Fi isn't too hot today. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm in the same boat. Like, I have a 30-inch baritone Jazzmaster. And I bought the guitar just on a whim because it sounded kind of cool. And then I found out that this is the tone that I'm always searching for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just put a ton of gain with single coils, and that's essentially what all of these guys are doing with these super high gain humbuckers, because they just boost the top end and then they wonder why like they're tone searching for days. You know, I mean, it's super noisy. I don't know if I play it live, but like for the studio, it's like the metal guitar. It sounds great. And so I think that it's, you know, really about breaking down like what you want out of your gear and like what you don't like about your gear right now, and then making a purchase based on that. You know, going back to monitors, it's like my Dynaudios, I've learned whenever I first got these speakers, it felt like a massive step up because I was using like these cheap JBLs, and like they would distort at such low levels that I thought my high end was always perfect, when in fact it was not perfect at all. What happens is if you turn up speakers, they'll start distorting naturally. And it doesn't sound like, for those who don't know, it doesn't sound like, you know, a mic clipping. It doesn't sound like a guitar pedal distortion. It sounds like almost like a smearing, where it'll literally smooth out your top end and you'll perceive it as sounding better, when in reality, it does, like the actual audio doesn't sound anything like that.
Or it smears out in my instance. So you have the Dynaudio lid 7s,
The 7s, yeah.
So, and I have the Yamaha HS 7s, and they're similar, where yours smears the top end, mine smears like the upper mid range, which is a really important area.
It's so important,
and which is a huge issue for me, that I have to listen to those areas in really low volumes, like really, really low volumes, lower than I normally do, because that area smears so easily. There's a lot of problematic frequencies in there, especially with guitars or hi-hats, especially like trap hats and vocals. A lot of the lispiness in like the 3 to 5K range, 3 to 6K range really is like really hard to hear whenever that stuff gets smeared, and it gets smeared so easily because of the distortion on those. The threshold's so low.
Yeah, see, with the old speakers, it was like higher than that. And kind of like that same problem area that you have, it kind of extended down. On these, I actually hear like 2 to 4K really, really well, which is a godsend, because like whenever you think of something sounding harsh, a lot of people will think it's like ultra high end, but typically it's your high mids that end up just making things sound terrible. My low end on these is awful. I mean, part of that is because of the room that I'm in, but like I've worked out of a bunch of different rooms. 2 of them were treated, and like the bass on these, even though it changes from room to room, it's still just awful. It's like after 80 hertz, it's gone. There's nothing. So if I'm doing anything, it was fine for like metal because like there isn't a whole lot going on down there. But whenever I started doing more pop music and hip hop, it was like,
everything felt really
this
thin.
sounds perfect. And then I put it in the car and the sub is eating the speakers, and I'm like, why? I wonder why. How bizarre.
Yeah.
You know? So
if you can't hear it, then you can't fix it. You know?
Right.
So
right.
And I had a similar issue with my the old speakers that I was using. Kind of the opposite thing. So at the studio that I was working at before I brought my studio to my house, we had HS8s, Yamaha HS8s, which are notoriously low mid tubby. So really hyped in like the lower mid range areas, but they also had the sub. So they make a Yamaha sub that pairs with those speakers or the HS7s that I have. I don't have the sub here, but for this reason of my low end was too much. So I would end up making really thin mixes, or the opposite would happen. I would push to really feel that low end in the room, and my mixes would be super low end heavy.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like for all of the newcomers out there, I feel like we all deal with this when we're starting out. You should not feel bass. You should hear bass. The first time that I went down to Fire K, he has a set of SM9s, which are like $8,000, and they're really hi-fi sounding. Like I know all the EDM guys love them, and so it's a
clear.
Great, like it's a great speaker to have if you're like a commercial studio where you have like your clients in the room doing production sessions, because you're able to hear all the details, but like it's pretty hi-fi at the same time. So it kind of gives the impression that it's closer to finished than it really is.
And the headroom on those things are wild. Like you can push them.
It's pretty dummy. It's very dummy.
For sure.
And I love like the high end on Focals. And so first time I mixed on those, mix came out awful because I wasn't used to the speakers. But what's interesting is because it's this wonderful space, the first time that I heard bass instead of feeling it was weird, because it's not something that we're used to. You figure you're driving in a car and you feel the rumble from the road. You know, you never just hear it. Like you always feel it. You know, that's why a lot of guys will actually use a sub pack instead of a set of subs, is because that way you're able to feel the bass without the bass being in the room.
Yeah, a sub pack is super cool. For those that don't know, it's this little backpack that attaches to your chair. I think you can actually wear it too, but it attaches to your chair, and it essentially pumps the sub frequencies from your system into that backpack, so you feel it like you are when you're sitting in a car. That's like really what they're after, is that like feeling of I'm sitting back in my chair and I can feel my back just like rumbling.
Which is a great option if you're in a smaller room and you want to stick to smaller speakers. Because there's like a lot that goes into a subwoofer. You know, I've been in studios with, I mean, at ClearTrack, they had a sub in every room, and it was crazy because of how hype it was. And I remember, I was there visiting Lane, and he was just like, yeah, like we really just do it for production sessions. So then that way, like the artist feels stoked.
Yeah.
And
that's the other thing. If you're more of a producer and a songwriter, and you are working, I would even say if you're a producer and a songwriter and you're mainly working with like hip hop music and EDM music, things where kind of the low end is the foundation of your song and your production. Something like that would be super beneficial. It is beneficial for you to be able to sit down and really feel the bass. So I understand that point of view because me and Josh both work on those kind of things sometimes. It is beneficial, especially early on when you're not really sure how to listen for bass, because that is
Yeah.
something that takes a lot of practice and intentionality.
Yeah, and like so the whole argument against subwoofers is that if it's a cheaper system with a cheaper crossover, then you'll run into like phase cancellation in the low end, which can cause more problems with monitoring than if you were to just not use a sub. But subs are also pretty lit. And
Yeah.
if you want that response in the room, like if you're always working with people in the room, it's not a bad idea to get a sub because then everybody's able to feel it. You won't have someone constantly saying turn the 808 up. And then whenever it's time to mix, you can always turn it off and kind of use it as a reference just to make sure your levels are solid. But if you're in kind of like a DIY setup, I wouldn't really recommend mixing on one.
I would say your better option, and I guess we're kind of starting to deviate from monitors. We'll come back to monitor. Actually, before I say this, let's finish up this monitor conversation real quick. The monitors for you as a producer, like we said, I feel like going a little cheaper and maybe a little more hyped is probably a little better for you if you're not mixing. If you definitely aren't mixing and you're just songwriting and making tracks for people, I feel like that'd probably be a really good way to go personally. I know that if I was only producing, like I wasn't mixing at all, I would probably change my speakers out for something a little more exciting, and I would probably add a sub for when I'm working with people in here. I could crank it and it just hits and everybody's feeling it, and I could annoy the crap out of my neighbors. But if you are looking to mix and you're looking at referencing, here's where we're getting into another conversation of be particular about your speakers, and instead of referencing on a sub, I've had better success personally with treating your room right, learning your room really well on one set of speakers, and referencing on a really good set of headphones.
Yep. And like also while we're talking about one set of speakers, a lot of guys have like 3 sets of speakers in the room for different, reference points. And to me, that's a waste. If you need 3 sets of speakers, then you shouldn't be using any of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like having
I know
like,
guys that use 2, and that's for a different thing. They have they're strategically using speakers, which I can talk about that. But yes, if you're using
like I mean, I've seen guys have like Amphion's next to Barefoots, Amphion's for mixing, and the Barefoots for when there's a artist in the room.
I've seen guys that do so. The common one is a pair of more hype, big sounding speakers, and then like I don't know, a pair of I think Scepters are a big one. But I feel like the NS10s, the Yamaha NS10s, paired with a bigger speaker is a really common look, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's like really common.
And that is for specifically full mix reference on the big speakers, and then on your NS10s or your smaller, more focused speakers. Generally, it's a set of speakers that has a lot less low end and a lot less high end. It's way more mid focused. It lets you hear a lot more problem areas, a lot of nasty stuff. It's really clear in those areas. So it is good for things like finding problem areas in your vocal, in your guitar, in your drum mid range, like your snare and your tom area, or if you have weird stuff happening in your overheads and rooms. That's a really good way to kind of find those things. But I say all of that to say They are not necessary. It is not
Mm-mm.
necessary. If you see big, like flashy multiple speakers, that's cool. I'm telling you from a person who does it all the time, it's not 100% necessary. There are guys that do mixes every single day on one set of speakers and a pair of headphones.
Yeah, and something else to add to that is whenever you're shopping for speakers, there's kind of like these different price points which are really strange. Like you have all the entry level speakers which are like $150 per speaker, then you get up into the mid range which is like $500 to $750 per speaker, and then there's kind of a gap until you hit like the $1,000 to $1,500 per speaker mark. And then after that, it's not you don't really get anything until you hit the $3,000 per speaker mark. So there's like these different price ranges with little gaps in between, and you can expect different things out of each one. And I guess the kind of point of all of this is if you need a set of speakers because you're planning on mixing, or you care deeply about your monitoring and want to offer the best like rough mixes that you can to artists, then it's pretty safe to say that any of the speakers in the $3,000 mark are going to be like more than enough for you. And they're going to be also good enough for a lot of the professional mix guys. If you take a set of Amphion's, Barefoots, PMCs, Focal, they have those solo sixes that are in that price range, any of those speakers, and give them to a professional mixer, they can do their thing on them. They might not enjoy them,
Yeah.
but they could do it. It gives you everything that you need. Anything after that, that's mostly going to be room dependent. That's going to be budget dependent.
I mean,
really,
it's per mix engineer most of the time. It's like how they're, because everybody's ears hear things pretty differently. So it's really like what works best for your ears and what works best for this person's ears,
Yeah.
The flattest, most universally positive speakers I think me and Josh have ever seen are the PMCs. I don't think I've ever heard anything.
It really comes down to their construction. I've heard Barefoots, and I'm not gonna lie, I really liked Barefoots. But I liked Barefoots with SonarWorks.
Yeah,
which I mean that can absolutely be a room issue
for sure.
But I've you hear mixed things about SonarWorks. Whenever I hear anybody talk about the PMCs that they own, they're like, "This is the last set of speakers I'll buy." And I mean, John Castelli was just talking about it on their podcast about the parts that they use, which was kind of news to me. But he said that he's pretty sure that everything that they use is 100% proprietary besides like one ATC mid-range driver that they use in one model. And, they have the, I forget what they call it. It's like the drive line or something like that. They have this really cool tech where it basically extends the frequency response lower and also through the crossover point, where most speakers can't do that. There's just no way to do it.
And that's a lot of time, that's what that issue causes, some of that smearing, some of that distortion, or it causes phase issues and causes a cancellation. So it either has too much of something because it's trying to cross over into that next. So by crossover, we mean there's generally two areas of a speaker. There's like your big main speak area of your speaker, and then there's your tweeter on the top for your high end, and then for some speakers there's even subs built into them, and so there has to be a crossover point for all of those speakers to sound like one unit. So if they don't cross over correctly, sometimes there will be a gap and you won't have that frequency, which in mixing, you literally cannot have that happen, because you need to be able to hear every single frequency available to you for issue fixing, for making the mix sound the best it can. The other issue is, like what he said, is sometimes when they try to extend those frequencies into the crossover, they double up and they're not matched right or something, and so they start pushing too much of that frequency, and that causes the distortion whenever you crank it up too much, and it causes that smearing effect we were talking about earlier, where you can't. It's hard to hear specific frequencies because that.
And then
that
the last
small
thing
amount of
is
distortion's
if it's
happening.
crossing over like that and they're on top of each other and then they're out of phase, then you don't have anything there.
Yeah. Which
So
is like
it'll sound flat until you put it somewhere else, and then there's a major bump somewhere. So that's kind of like what you run into with cheaper speakers. Once you get into, you know, that higher price point that I mentioned, that's when those things really start getting tight. You know, like, I mean, I know guys that swear by Footprints, by Barefoot. I know guys that swear by Solo 6s. I know guys that swear by PMCs. I know people who swear by Amphion. You know, it's like all of those brands, they're solid brands. Just listen to them.
See what works best for you.
Yeah, you know, yeah, that's really what it comes down to.
I will say right now is kind of hard to do, to be fair.
Yeah,
but
everything's closed.
Yeah, exactly. So, like we said, if you're speaker shopping in that range, then cool. Buy a pair, live with them for like I think Sweetwater does like a 30-day return.
Depending on what, I'm pretty sure they go all the way up to like 60 days.
Okay, so like there you go. Spending a month with a set of speakers will let you know if that's what works for you or not. And if they don't work for you, just return them and then get a different pair and look for one until you find the right set.
You know what? Like, you know, we had mentioned before that Sweetwater reps are great resources for information. Those guys get to test these things hands on. And sometimes I think the best input for, you know, what's up with speakers is to talk to both the guys who know exactly what they're talking about and then the guys who don't really know what they're talking about, because that kind of naive perspective can actually add a lot of, you know, insight into what it is. And so I was talking to John, my Sweetwater rep, and I was like, hey man, I saw that you guys started carrying PMCs. I've been super interested in them. This is before I heard anything really about them. I thought that they looked cool. I saw the price point and I was curious. And so he was like, yeah, so before we carried those, I always said that the Adams S3Vs were like the best because of their new tweeter, I think it was.
Yeah, they
redid
the driver and the tweeter, and it sounds super clear.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like any other Adams speaker from ever, but they're $7,000 a set. Like that's a ton of money.
Yeah,
you know, like if I'm working on majors, sure, you know, but like right now, let's not even think about it.
Slow down.
And so he was talking about how that was his favorite speaker, and then he heard the Adams next to a set of Barefoots next to a set of PMCs, and he said that the PMCs were hands down the best all around. They're very flat, they're very even, they give you clear transient response all throughout. Something to consider, a lot of these brands, I'm pretty sure even my Dion Audios have it, is a lot of these have onboard DSP to try to give you a better listening experience, which is stupid.
Yeah.
Why would you want your speakers to change what you're hearing? You know?
That's why you're paying the higher price point for a speaker that is supposedly, like we said, quote unquote, supposedly flatter. You don't want the hype in the high mids, or you don't want the notchy bump in like I think mine have a weird notch at like 2K for some reason.
Oh, they 100% do.
Yeah.
I was listening to Nick's when I was in LA and it was very obvious.
Yeah, me and Nick use the same ones. The but then it comes to
he just got shapes.
Huh?
He just got shapes.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I texted him about it. Yeah,
I can't wait to hear those if I could ever travel again.
I know, right? Which I know. I believe John McLucas homie was using Focal shapes for a long time. And I know his mixes were translating pretty well on that. They are really.
He was
solid.
on alphas.
Huh?
He was on alphas, the ones that are like half.
He was on alphas. Okay, yeah, that's even better. Like they're half the price. Like that's. And you can make your mix translate on that. So let's transition from higher end speakers like your PMCs. And I won't even say higher end speakers. I'll say upper mid speakers.
It's a weird price point, man, because like for like beginners, like that's like I remember seeing speakers for $500 a pair when I was first starting, and I was like, oh, that's what the pros mix on. And then reality hit me in the face, and I'm like, some of these speakers cost more than
literally
the BMW I dream about.
$7,000 for a speaker, for a side, is like normal in the top end of speakers.
Yeah.
So when we say top end of speakers, we more so mean like the top end of what we are probably ever going to use in our
And
home
mind you, we're
studios.
talking about near field speakers. There's
Yeah.
different kinds. You're not going to see any of the different kinds in a lower price range.
Yeah.
But I think that we're in this new era where even the best mix engineers are working in something that's kind of similar to a home studio setup.
Mhm.
So, you're not going to have these massive main setups.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget the guy's name and I feel bad I can't drop it, but Chris Brown's mix engineer, he literally mixes out of a bedroom, and he has a set of PMCs. I want to say they're even like Result 6s. Like it's nothing
Yeah, that's
crazy.
what we're looking at.
And a MacBook.
Mhm.
And like that's it, in an untreated room, and that's what he mixes on. And like he has how many number ones, and
Yeah.
it's like we're kind of in this cool place right now where gear is getting cheaper because the facilities are getting cheaper, right?
Mhm.
So, $3,000 for a set of speakers is a lot of money, but it's one of those things where it's going to give you everything that you're able to compete with, and you're going to be able to keep it forever. But then also, like, great speakers are now also getting a lot cheaper underneath that price point.
So let's
like
talk about those. Let's talk about those, like the sub. So I think we kind of broke it down into like your $700 or $800 a pair.
I'm pulling up Sweetwater right now.
Maybe even like $700 to $1,000 a pair speaker was like the step below of what we're talking about. So for reference, Barefoot's PMCs, Amphions, you're talking like $3,000 plus, probably maybe $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah, we'll just bump all that into like the $1,000 to $1,500.
Yeah, that's your top end. So let's come down to the like $700 to $1,000, and this is where probably most of your like serious, I'm getting started in making my career as a mix engineer or producer. This is probably where a lot of people are going to live. This is where me and Josh are right now. That's where my speakers are. I want to say $800 for the pair, maybe even $700 for the pair.
Oh, see, I'm going per speaker right now.
Oh, okay.
So we were just talking about $1,500 a pop. I'm not even going to talk about the $1,000 to like $1,500 range. So
it's kind of weird.
I think my top pick from like $750 to $1,000 is going to be the Folk House Shape series. They're probably the best speakers that you could get in that price range, because your other options are the Dion Audio OID series, some Mackies, some JBLs, and then Genelecs. Genelecs have a very specific sound. I was kind of set on them for a while, but like I haven't heard them, and I know my speakers, so I'm better off just keeping them until I get a really nice set of speakers.
I will say the Genelecs, for somebody who is looking to just produce, might not be a bad move. I know like Bring Me the Horizon used a pair of small Genelecs to record their last EP that did really, really well.
You're talking like $300 to $400 per speaker.
Yeah,
cheap.
Cheap in reference to like speakers. $300 or $400 per speaker is pretty cheap. So we're talking like $700 to $800 for the pair.
What's crazy about Genelec is it's almost like they're the best like low end speaker, and then their high end speakers are like a good $2,000 more than what we were just talking about.
Yeah, their high end speakers are wild.
They start at like $5,000 for a pair.
I think the good ones that I like are like the ones that are like the faceless ones with the little dot in the middle. Those are like $8,500 or something like that.
Those are 3-ways too.
I know, they're wild.
The next set, going from like the 500 to 750 range, I think the only ones that you should really consider are going to be Atom, even though I hate to recommend their lower end speakers. It's just not a thing that I dig.
Yeah. But I mean, I know some people that like them.
And like a lot of rock guys like them.
Yeah, JBLs. A lot of rock guys like the JBLs in that range.
There are no JBLs on Sweetwater site in that
Or
range
maybe
right
maybe
now.
it's the JBLs in the range above with the focal shapes that a lot of guys like.
They stopped making those, but I know the ones with all the knobs on the front.
Yeah,
Yeah, they stopped making those.
but they're good. They were cool. I know a lot of
They
people
are
that
good.
liked them.
I know, dude. There's so many guys I know who still mix on those, or J mixes on those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say Atom A7X, Focal Alpha series, and then the Neumann KH series. The Neumanns are super flat. They're probably
Yeah.
like the most accurate mixing speaker that you could find in that price range. What's
they
interesting
sound
about
cool.
them, they offer these speakers, they're 5.25 inches and they're $700 a set. The next step up for them is $2,200 per speaker for their 3-ways. So they really care about what they're doing and they're pricing accordingly, which is really good to know because, you know, Neumann kind of gets carried away with their microphones.
Yeah.
But those speakers, like everybody I know who's used them said that they're incredible to mix on, maybe not the best to produce on. But I think between the Focal, the JBL, or the Atom, and then Neumann, like that gives you a good range of what to choose from.
And that was how much? What price range was that?
Like right around the $500 to $750 range. The Neumanns are the most expensive. They're $700 a piece, and they're also the smallest out of that bunch.
Oh, $700 a speaker.
Yep.
Got you.
Yep. And then going down to the $300 to $500, that's whenever you're looking at the super tiny Genelecs that are great for travel.
Mm-hmm.
You have the HS series from Yamaha,
which is what I have.
JBLs. You know, any of those speakers are going to do pretty all right. The one speaker I have a lot of experience with is the IK Multimedia iLoud MTM speaker.
I forgot
these things look so cheap because they look like rip-off Genelecs, and they come with their own little reference mic to fix the frequency response to your room. I have no clue how much that affects the phase because it's like per speaker. But Sam just got those because he needed smaller speakers for his room.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, they are way more accurate than my Dynaudios. Every time I do a demo at his place and I play it in the car, it sounds perfect. Anytime I do a demo on these speakers, even though I know them, I'm never happy. So, you know, that's me. Spent $750 a piece on these speakers, and I hate them. Well, I didn't spend that much. I got them used.
Yeah, I was about to say. I spent
Shout out to Guitar
$700
Center.
for the pair for mine.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Don't be afraid to buy used. Like if you're buying from a reputable dealer, like Reverb is really good with protecting you. My dad bought a guitar through them, and there was a crack in the neck pocket, and they fixed it.
That's where I got my speakers, and I ended up getting them for basically half price.
Yeah, dude, I paid. See, I thought I was gonna pay half price for these speakers, but Guitar Center made me pay for shipping. And then there's tax and all that good stuff. So it ended up coming out to be like I ended up saving $400 when I bought these, which is solid. A lot. You know, there was only a small chip in the corner. Now nobody wants to buy them, but you know, yeah, definitely shop used. Check out Guitar Center. Check out Reverb. Sweetwater's now selling used gear as well.
Yeah,
shout out to them because we love them.
Yep.
But I think that just about covers everything. If you're looking for a super cheap set of $150 speakers, literally pick anything because it doesn't matter that much.
And let's do a quick little blurb on headphones. Headphones are cool from a. I like to use them for referencing. I've challenged myself this year to mix more on headphones, because I like the idea of me not being confined to a room specifically. You know this. I've talked to you about this, but I have been, this is something I've been kind of thinking about for a minute, but really I think this new year, 2021, I'm going to dig in and try to mix more on solely my headphones. I'm probably going to upgrade these. These are the Beyerdynamic DT990s. They are open back. They don't have a closed back, so noise escapes them. You don't get weird low end buildups like my Sennheiser HD280 Pros, which a lot of people also have these. These are great for tracking because they're closed back and they don't allow sound to escape. They're super sealed, so they're great for tracking. The ones that I'm wearing right now, my Biodynamics, they are terrible for tracking because literally sound just escapes out the back of it.
Yeah.
So you can hear everything. But
Another thing to take into consideration with headphones is your ears naturally compress.
Mhm.
It's called the something Munson something
Curve.
where it's basically as audio gets louder, your ears think that it sounds better. So it's important to get open back headphones so the sound pressure doesn't become too much. It's also important to try out different headphones. I bought this pair of Audio Technica R70Xs. I love them because they're super lightweight and they have this little spring-loaded head thing.
Yeah.
And so I could literally wear these for hours with no issue. Problem is I don't really like how they sound. They aren't super, super accurate. I know that like the higher end Beyerdynamic stuff is always talked about. Sennheiser HD600s.
So that's what I was going to upgrade to, is the 600 or 650 Pros, maybe? I don't remember. It's one of the open back series that is really widely regarded as the flattest headphones that people have found.
So what's interesting is like those are like kind of like the baseline for mixing on headphones.
Yeah.
You know, I know that the Beyerdynamic 1990s are like really, really good. And then probably the nicest headphones that you could get for mixing without getting into like audiophile territory is Audi's headphones. I think that's how you pronounce it. The LCD2s are talked about a lot. Moshe and Rob, two of our friends, they both adore those headphones. About $1,000 for a pair.
Yeah.
So like, you know, that's really getting up there. But
what it does allow you to do, and this is why it's at least it's appealing to me, is that it doesn't require you to do crazy amounts of room treatment, and it also doesn't like require you to be in your one place to mix.
Right. Another thing to consider is in-ear monitors.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful because in-ear monitors are going to mess with you even more than closed back headphones. So you have to make sure you get the right kind.
Yep.
The 64 Audio, they actually have a patented design where there's a pressure regulator in the actual earpiece. So the more bass that comes in, the more pressure is released. So that way your ears are constantly listening at a
it's a
proper pressure.
It's a flat balanced pressure level. So it's similar to microphones in that your SPL for microphones. We kind of talked about it on our microphone episode, but SPL for microphones, dynamic microphones can take a higher sound pressure level than condenser microphones because they are less gain, they're less likely to break. The higher sound pressure level for condenser microphones could potentially break some of them. Caveat that a lot of them are made super well now, and that's very unlikely, but it is possible. The opposite is the case for what we're talking about with headphones. The sound pressure level, your ear has a fixed sound pressure level per person that it can handle before it starts compressing or before it starts altering what you're hearing, and
or just flat out damaging your ears.
just destroying your eardrum. And you got to be really careful with that. So like with these, when I'm mixing on these, I'm at a very low listening volume. Like I can have, these are open back, so I can still hear my room around me. Like my wife will come in while I'm mixing, and like it's low enough that I can talk to her while I'm mixing with my headphones on.
I have to do the same thing. And I mean, I do that with my speakers too. So yeah, like you basically want to make sure, I mean, mind you, like the monitors that we were talking about are the same price as those 64 Audio in-ears, you know? Like they're expensive, but now like you have something that fits in your pocket that you can go, like if you're a live sound engineer and you do monitor mixes, that's probably the best thing that you could buy, because you could use them whenever you're out on a gig. You can also use them when you're at home. You can use them for mixing, like
and
that probably makes the most sense. That's what Nick did.
Well, yeah, and what I was going to say was we can give people some reference. So recently, there has been a couple people to mix records that have gone out. I mean, there are more that we don't know about, but there are guys mixing and mastering on headphones right now for songs that are going to radio, whether it's rock radio or pop radio, and you could not tell a difference. And
Yep.
some of them are referencing on Apple AirPods. Like they're
Yeah.
literally using AirPods to reference.
And then there's also guys who are mixing on headphones, and it's very obvious that they're mixing on headphones
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, there's always this weird mid-range stuff going on. The high end is just sort of weird. Like typically you could tell, other times you can't. So once again, it's about learning your gear. As long as it doesn't hold you back, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for everybody, but it's important to sit down and actually learn your stuff first before you decide on whether or not it's holding you back.
So two
back?
records that I know of, and Josh also knows of, that were mixed by one guy in quarantine, mixed by the same guy. They sound very different to me. Both records do. Are the new Bring Me the Horizon post-human survival horror EP was mixed 100% on headphones by two. Actually, that was mixed by two different guys because Luden's was mixed by Dan.
Same with Parasite Eve.
And Parasite Eve was mixed by Dan. But they were all headphones, I believe. Parasite Eve might not have been.
No, Dan doesn't mix on headphones.
But he mixed Luden's on headphones.
Oh really?
Yeah, he mixed. I think he mixed it in. I think he mixed it in a hotel room.
He definitely mixed it somewhere, and then he brought it to the hotel room.
Maybe
to
that's
show
what it
them.
was.
So he did revisions on headphones. So
He probably he did revisions on headphones. So it's like we'll
say 1.5.
yeah. But the rest of the songs were mixed by John Feldman's guy, whose name is
Zach Cervini.
Yeah, Zach Cervini. Yeah, that's how you say it. Zach Cervini, who's big in like the pop rock, pop punk kind of world, working with Feldman. Did a lot of production and mixing for Feldman. But he's recently mixed the rest of the songs on Post-Human Survival Horror by Bring Me the Horizon, and he has mixed the entire new Architects record, which I can't remember what it's called, but it's about to come out in the end of February.
Wait, he mixed it?
Yeah, he mixed it.
Weird.
And that's what I'm saying. Those two albums sound very different, but they were mixed by the same guy on the same headphones in the same place.
I'll be honest with you. While I think his mixes are impressive from like I have things I dislike and then I have things I like most things, right?
Yeah, but that's some of that's preference and opinion.
Yeah, like the way that he uses saturation on that record is really cool.
So
I think it's super interesting. However, the low end response on it, you could tell it was mixed on headphones.
And it could have also just been his preference too, because I need to go back and listen to stuff that he has mixed not on headphones, knowing that he had mixed it in a room.
He mixed Being as an Ocean. He mixed Fever. He mixed.
Yeah, that Fever record is probably a really good example of.
He does all the Youngblood stuff too, I think.
Yeah, he did, and he mixed the new Youngblood record, I believe, all in his house on headphones as well.
Yeah, that record sounds really good.
Yeah, it does, and like low end on that one's great. So maybe it was just like a album choice.
Yeah.
So, but go check those out if you're interested in albums that were mixed on headphones. I also believe that a lot of Periphery 3, I think Nolly mentioned that he mixed a lot of that on headphones. I could be wrong. Though?
He got like $7,000 speakers to listen to.
For reference, dude.
That dude's nuts.
Dude, he's wild.
Nolly is crazy.
He's a wild man.
Yeah, if anybody wants to like learn how to mix heavy music, just look at the free tutorials he puts out on YouTube. Yeah. And like his voice is so calming. That man could just speak to me all day and I'd die happy.
For me personally, just talking about amazing mixes that he's done, between Periphery 3 and Holy Hell, the Architects record that he did, like, it's just mind-blowingly wild to me.
Those two records have nothing on Alien by Northlane, though.
Yeah, which he also mixed, which is
That
also
mix
wild.
is insane. That is the wildest mix I've ever heard in my life.
It's. I know you're not listening to this, but Nolly, if you're listening to this, that record, I don't understand how you managed all of the parts in that record because there's so much happening and it's so clear. I don't understand.
It's godlike. Like everything has its place, but then everything sounds like it's like full range. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Like
pretty.
the
Even if you're
guitars are
not,
fat, but then the drums are fat, and it's
yeah,
like you can't have both if you're me,
but you did
because I'm bad. But like him, it's just like it's crazy.
Yeah,
He,
if you're not into that kind of music, honestly, I would still go listen to that. If you're not into heavier music, I would still go listen to Alien by Northlane and a lot of these other records that we've mentioned. They are generally rock or heavier records,
yeah,
but
his
from
mixes.
the sonics of those records are just really wild to me.
Yeah, so I was just about to say, like, the mix on Alien by Northlane, it's literally like a pop mix, but with a million things.
Yeah, it's got so much stuff.
Like, I mean, distorted guitars take up so much room in general,
Mhm.
and it's just like that mix is like
Plus synths.
very clean, and the transient response is very clean. Like, it's not super compressed, it's not super anything, it's just super, super clean.
His vocal
And
is super present, which is wild to me that all of that stuff is there, but his vocal is also very much at the forefront of all of the
yeah.
mix.
Like, I barely even listen to heavy music anymore, and that record still gets me excited because it was so well produced, it was so well recorded, and the mix is just phenomenal. Like, seriously, if you want to like learn a thing or two about mixing, go watch his tutorials, because like once you learn how to mix 120 track heavy song with all these different things, going down to like a 30 track pop song is just a piece of cake. So highly
And
recommended.
he does a lot of talking about, if you're interested in mixing on headphones, he has a bunch of different videos on YouTube about mixing on headphones from a dude that mixes on a professional, like super professional level. He is a very good, interesting like person to watch and listen to talk about mixing, because he does both. He talks about, he was in the early stages of mixing on headphones, and he is trying to also transition into mixing 100% on headphones, same as Cervini. They're both, and there are pop guys that do it all the time now that we just don't know about. You know, like I said, there are guys that just don't say what they're mixing on, because the results, and this is the biggest thing, the results speak for themselves.
Well, it's just like there's songs on the radios where the guitars, or not the guitars, the vocals were recorded on an iPhone mic. You know, like, despite having access to all this gear, sometimes like deadlines and COVID just prevents you from doing what you need to do. So you make things work.
And this comes to a landing the plan conversation about this whole subject of monitoring and headphones and listening is, if it sounds good, it is good. But make sure you are referencing to high quality stuff.
Yeah. And just learn your gear.
Learn your gear.
Something that really kind of hit me over Black Friday, I bought the Isotope music production bundle just because I was like, it's more stuff. It seems like it has everything that I need. And I really sat down and learned how those plugins work. And now, like, I'm mostly like, here, I saved all the plugins that I use. Before, I used a ton of plugins, but now I'm mostly just using Ozone 9. I use Neutron if something needs like really fixed, or for like the transient designer. I use a few Fab Filter plugins. I use 4 Waves plugins, and then I use the Slate bundle, and like that's it. Like it simplified my
maybe
process so
15
much.
to 20 plugins total, because of the Slate bundle being multiple things.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'll tell you what I use in the Slate bundle. I use the API EQ, I use the CS EQ, I use the 1176 and the LA2A.
Oh, nice. You don't even use.
And then
the
sometimes
extra
I'll
stress.
use the preamps, and that's it.
Yeah.
I can't hear you, but I could hear me.
My computer's starting to freak out.
Cool. Well, I think that this would be a great place to end it.
Yes, it would be.
Sweet. Well, thanks for listening to us ramble.
Yep. Hey,
It's been real.
just if you take anything away from this, learn your gear.
Learn your gear and make sure your gear is not holding you back.
Yep.
But make sure you learn it first, because if you don't learn it, then there's no way to tell if it's you or the gear that's holding you back.
That's a good point.
We could have just said that and ended the podcast and it would have been fine. But instead we talked about it for an hour.
Hey, you know what? That's what we do. On that note,
That's what we do.
thank you for your time. Thank you for your ears. Thank you for your listening to us talk and ramble and stuff. Let us know if you have any questions or if you just want some more recommendations of stuff. We're always down to chat. Check us out on Instagram. That's kind of where me and Josh both live the most, I would say.
TikTok. That's
yeah.
where I've been.
Josh has been on TikTok, so check him out over there. And we are out. And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today. If you'd like to find any of the links to all of the stuff that we talked about today, you can find it on YouTube. Just search Home Studio Hangout or find it on the After School Podcast YouTube channel. All the links for everything we talked about will be in the description of this episode. Thanks again for checking us out. If you aren't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast channel. Leave a review if you gain some knowledge or learn something from what we talked about today. It helps other people find us and maybe even grow a little bit more. Once again, thanks for coming and hanging out, and keep on creating.